Every single one of us has a worldview. It's kind of like a map that we use to get around in reality. But here's the thing about maps. They're only helpful if they actually match the territory, right? We need a map that can make sense of the whole shebang, from the incredible vastness of the cosmos right down to the deep mystery of our own consciousness.
So, what's the big question we're digging into here? It's really this: which worldview, which map, gives us the most complete and logical explanation for the reality we all live in? We're going to build a case, piece by piece, to see if Christian theism really does offer the best fit for everything we see and experience.
All right, let's get into it. First, we're going to look at some of the huge, fundamental puzzles of reality itself. Then, we'll start looking for clues out in the cosmos, inside our own minds, and even in our search for what's true. And finally, we'll pull it all together and ask if there's a single, unifying story that connects all these dots. Okay, so to start, any worldview that's worth its salt has to be able to answer some really basic but profound questions about the world. These are the non-negotiables. Really think about these for a second. Why does anything exist? Why isn't there just nothing? And the universe we do have, why is it governed by these incredibly precise and predictable laws? And then there's us. Why are we here? These strange, self-aware beings who compose music and fall in love and invent things. And maybe the deepest of all, how can we even trust our own minds to figure out what's true or what's genuinely right and wrong? These are the big puzzles any good map of reality has to solve. Let's start building our case with the first piece of evidence. And we're starting big, really big, with the universe itself. What does the study of the cosmos tell us about where this all came from? For the longest time, a lot of scientists just assumed the universe was eternal, that it had always been here. That was the old steady-state model. But over the last century or so, the evidence has just piled up, and it all points in a totally different direction. Things like the fact that the universe is expanding, or the discovery of the leftover heat from its creation. It all points to a finite beginning, a single moment when all time, all space, and all matter burst into existence. And this leads us to a really simple but incredibly powerful piece of logic called the Kalam cosmological argument. It goes just like this. First, whatever begins to exist has a cause. That seems pretty obvious, right? Second, the universe began to exist. Well, science seems to be telling us that's true. So the conclusion is simple. The universe has a cause. So what kind of cause are we even talking about here? It couldn't be a physical cause, right? Because all of physical reality, all of space, all of time, all of matter, that's what came into being at that moment. The cause had to be outside of time and space. It would have to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, yet powerful enough to create everything from nothing. This points away from just another domino falling in a chain and points toward what philosophers call agent causation, the idea of a conscious being with the power and freedom to make a choice, the choice to create. And this idea of a rational, personal creator isn't some science stopper. In fact, if you look at history, it's what made modern science possible in the first place. This popular idea of a war between science and faith, it's just not accurate. Modern science was pioneered by people who believed in a rational God who created an orderly universe. That belief gave them the confidence that the universe was understandable and that we could actually study it. The very foundations of science rest on ideas that fit perfectly with a Christian worldview. But it's not just the origin of the universe, it's the structure of it that's a clue. Physicists have discovered that the basic forces of nature, things like gravity and electromagnetism, are balanced on a knife's edge. If you tweak their values by even a microscopic amount, a universe that could support life would be totally impossible. It just couldn't happen. So you're left with two options. Either we won some kind of unbelievable cosmic lottery, or it was designed that way on purpose. Okay, so let's zoom all the way in. Let's go from the vastness of space to the inner world of the human mind. Because the fact that we are conscious, self-aware beings is maybe the most personal and baffling clue of all. If you take a purely materialistic view, we're just complex chemical machines, biological robots that evolved for one purpose, survival. But that just feels like it falls so short, doesn't it? How does a blind, random process produce creatures that can write symphonies, discover the laws of quantum mechanics, tell stories, and ponder the meaning of their own lives? The genius of humanity just seems like way more than what's needed to simply survive and reproduce. And when we look down at the very core of life itself, we find something absolutely incredible: the digital code packed into our DNA. Now think about that.
It's not just a random string of chemicals. It's highly specific, instructional information. It's a blueprint that builds the complex machinery of life. And in every other area of our lives, every single time we see complex, specified information, whether it's in a book or in computer software, where does it come from? It always comes from a mind, an intelligent source. That's a powerful clue pointing toward an intelligent designer for life itself. All right, let's move on to our final category of clues. And these are a little different. We're talking about the abstract world of ideas, things like truth and morality. If the universe is just atoms bumping around, where do these things even come from? First things first, we have to get clear on what we mean by truth. There's objective truth, which is true whether we believe it or not. It corresponds to reality. And then there's subjective truth, the whole you have your truth, I have my truth idea, which is really just about personal preference. But here's the kicker. Science, logic, reason, all of them absolutely depend on the existence of objective truth. And this leads to a huge problem for any worldview that says only science can give us truth. This idea, sometimes called scientism, actually shoots itself in the foot. Why? Well, because the statement, I only believe what science can prove, is a philosophical claim that science itself can't prove. You can't put that statement in a test tube. To have a solid foundation for truth, you need something that stands outside the physical system, and a purely materialist worldview just doesn't have that. And we find the exact same problem when we talk about morality. A purely naturalistic worldview can maybe explain why we have moral feelings. Maybe they helped our ancestors survive in groups. But it can't give us a foundation for why some things are objectively right or wrong. Without a transcendent standard, morality just becomes mob rule, or whatever the people in power say it is. It can't explain that deep-down intuition we all have that some things, like cruelty to a child, are just plain wrong for everyone, everywhere, all the time. So, we've looked at clues from the cosmos, clues from consciousness, and clues from our search for truth and goodness. Now, let's see if we can pull all these different threads together into one single, coherent picture. Just think back through what we've covered. The idea of a personal, intelligent, transcendent creator makes perfect sense of why the universe had a beginning and why it's so perfectly fine-tuned for us to be here. The idea that we are made in the image of God explains our unique consciousness and the amazing information we find in our DNA. And a God who is himself the very standard of truth and goodness provides the rock-solid foundation that both objective truth and morality need to stand on. You see, the real power here isn't in any single argument, but in the way they all lock together. This isn't about finding some little gap in our scientific knowledge and just sticking God in there. Not at all. It's about seeing how Christian theism provides one single coherent framework that makes sense of the evidence from so many different fields, from cosmology to biology to philosophy. And you know what? It also makes the most sense of our own personal experience. It explains the great paradox of being human, that we are capable of such incredible beauty and creativity and love, and at the same time capable of such profound evil and selfishness. The biblical account says we're made in the image of God, which explains our glory, but we're also fallen, which explains our tragedy. That just rings true, doesn't it? So, let's bring it all back to where we started. We were looking for a map, a worldview, that best fits the territory of reality. We've seen how Christian theism offers a powerful, coherent explanation for the universe's origin and design, for our own consciousness, and for our ability to know what's true and what's good. So if one worldview has this much explanatory power, if it makes the most sense of everything we know, isn't it at least worth exploring seriously?